Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ms. Dorsey, and I am the Secondary Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Coordinator, and I also teach film and television. And today we're here to talk to you about our experience. Earlier, back in December, we went to the National Association of Independent Schools Student Diversity Leadership Conference. And our panel of students that came are going to share with you their experiences and lead you in activity. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, a little while back we all attended SDLC, which as you just heard is the Student Diversity Leadership Conference, and we talked about a multitude of different things each day, especially focusing on like key factors of identity and essentially what makes each person unique and what makes you you. While we each had different things that made us special and unique, we all enjoyed the experience and we're excited to share that with you today. In just a moment, you'll see some videos from each of us about what we gained from this experience, and I think I speak for all of us when I say that if you're interested in diversity, leadership, equity, and inclusion, you should apply to go to this conference next time Campbell Hall gets the opportunity to go. Thank you.
Hi, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Annabelle Perez and I'm currently a sophomore.
Hi, I'm Izzy. I recently went to the Student Diversity Leadership Conference, or SDLC, and I'm here to just talk a little bit about what I got from that.
Hi, my name is Nicholas, and last December I attended the Student Diversity Leadership Conference.
Hi, my name is Kimmy Curry. I'm a junior here at Campbell Hall, and I attended the SDLC conference.
Participating in the Student Diversity Leadership Conference was a great opportunity for me to connect with students from different independent schools all over the country.
Part of the reason SDLC was so meaningful was because I was surrounded by melanated kids who looked and acted just like me. Growing up in PWIs, predominantly white schools, that's an opportunity I seldom got the chance to have. So it was honestly so refreshing to be surrounded by kids who share the same ideas, beliefs, and experiences that I've been having since I was a little girl.
I'm one of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice liaisons at Campbell Hall, so obviously I know what diversity is in kind of that textbook sense of like, oh, different people coming together, forming a community, and like as such, Campbell Hall is like a diverse community, but I saw diversity and inclusivity, honestly, as something completely different through this conference. It was no longer just like people with like differing like sexual identities or like races or genders. It was people from different countries, different continents, whole different backgrounds, things that with different perspectives that I could never think of with my background.
I was able to talk with students in the SDLC Latinx affinity group, and it was really validating to meet with people who shared some of the same experiences as me, as well as learn about different and new perspectives other than my own.
Going into the conference, Ms. Dorsey asked us to list a set of goals, but since I really didn't know what we were going to do, except that it was going to be about diversity, I just wrote down to learn, grow, and become a different person. And honestly, that's exactly what I did. I knew personally I had much to improve on when it comes to my culture, because although I'm super proud of it, I noticed sometimes I hid it in certain environments or adjusted myself based on
In this activity, the conference leaders read out statements regarding how we identify ourselves, such as raise your hand if you identify as Latino, and those of us who identified with the statement would raise our hands. The leaders of this activity read out many statements about the different ways we identify ourselves, such as through race, religion, gender, ability, sexual orientation, language, family structure, and much more. This activity brought to light all the different ways in which we identify and how diverse everyone who attended this conference was.
It was so nice to be able to connect with students from so many different backgrounds and cultures. I learned so much about the different facets of my own identity as well as the complexities of others.
We talked about the way African Americans have to move differently through society based on the color of their skin. Since slavery, Jim Crow, all the way up until now, African Americans have to face stigma, stereotypes, prejudice, racism, and inequality at every turn in their lives. And that's not often highlighted in the social media. It's often not highlighted at all, unless it's Black History Month.
If you know me, you know I'm a very loud and outgoing person. And when not in a comfortable environment, I hid that side of me because I had assumed people wouldn't accept me for being such an open person. but the conference made me realize that it's just the way us Latinos are. Before coming to CH, I attended a small private school where everybody else was like me. So coming to a big, welcoming, diverse community, I was unsure how to act, so I acted as someone I wasn't. But then I joined my affinity group, Latinos Unidos, a group of very familiar people who opened my eyes to realize that changing myself for others wasn't right. Also, it wasn't the community that made me feel that I needed to be somebody else. It was the mindset I had of being worried I wasn't going to be accepted.
As the vice president of the Latinx Club at Campbell Hall, it was a great opportunity to learn from the affinity group in the conference. I talked to students who were leaders in their own Latinx affinity clubs at their schools, and we got to give each other helpful advice regarding how to approach leadership positions that I'm eager to apply to my own community. We learned about cycles of oppression, bystander interventions, and ways to combat intolerance in our own school.
It was extremely powerful to see all the other people who identified in the same ways as us, but also in the different ways people identified.
At the conference, I met so many others who had the same issues and worries as me. So for all of us, it was very comforting to share and grow together.
The different perspectives and different things you'll learn, not from going to different schools, but from living completely different lives, and how you can still kind of all have something in common that can bring you together. For me and the other people I met at this conference, it was a passion for social justice and diversity in America.
It was so influential because I was surrounded by a community of like-minded individuals who had the same ideas that I did. And that's why I want to strive towards a better society every single day. And that's why I want to advocate for equality and anti-racism efforts at Campbell Hall and in my community.
By the end of the conference, I can confidently say that I don't always worry about how others view me or needing to adjust my personality for others. But at the end of the day, the most important thing that I learned was that diversity is much more than a culture and a race. It's about acceptance and respect of every individual.
Knowing that everything we learned at the SCLC conference would be heard by a diverse range of people gave me confidence that this information would be processed and applied in so many unique ways across all of our communities.
And so that's why I'm so grateful for the opportunity that Campbell Hall gave me to go to that conference, and I really recommend it to anyone else that maybe wants to go next year. It was a really cool experience.
I'm so glad that I did the SDLC, and I urge you all to participate next year.
This was an incredibly meaningful and fulfilling experience, and I really encourage anyone who is thinking about this conference to attend it.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi again. So each day we had like a different activity, but a group favorite of ours was the silent movement. Essentially, in the silent movement, someone asked different questions about different facets of our identity, and we raised our hands to whichever applied to us. This activity is meant to shed light on the amount of diversity in our community, specifically Campbell Hall. And I think it'll kind of become a little bit more clear as we do it. So we're asking you to participate with us today. Just a quick reminder that all of these questions are voluntary. You don't have to answer anything you're not comfortable with. Okay. Please raise your hand if you identify as Asian or a Pacific Islander. If you identify as African American or Black. If you identify as Indigenous. If you identify as an international citizen. If you identify as Latinx. If you identify as a multiracial American. Or if you identify as white.
Okay. The next questions are going to be religion-based questions. So let's start with the first one. Raise your hand if you identify as Jewish. Yeah, okay. Raise your hand if you identify as Christian. Okay. Raise your hand if you identify as Catholic. Okay, a little less. Raise your hand if you identify as Muslim. Raise your hand if you identify as Hindu. No one? Raise your hand if you identify as agnostic. Okay. Raise your hand if you identify as atheist. And raise your hand if you identify as spiritual. All right.
So the next set of questions pertains to language. So raise your hand if you only speak English. Okay. Raise your hand if you speak one other language besides English. Okay. Raise your hand if you speak 2 or more languages. And raise your hand if you speak 3 or more languages. Okay.
All right, these next questions are pertaining to family structure. Please raise your hand if you live in a 2-parent household. Okay. Raise your hand if you live in a 1-parent household. And please raise your hand if you live in a 2 single-parent households. All right, thank you.
The next set of questions are pertaining to sexual orientation. Please raise your hand if you identify as gay. Please raise your hand if you identify as lesbian. If you identify as straight. If you identify as bisexual. If you identify as queer. If you identify as heterosexual. If you identify as pansexual. If you identify as asexual. If you identify as intersex. If you identify as trans. And please raise your hand if you are on the LGBTQ spectrum. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you for participating. This activity sheds light on the rage of diversity in our community. We hope that you learned as much as we did. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Just to let you know, Campbell Hall, the schools are selected by lottery every year. It used to be every year we can go. So we usually don't know if our school is selected until the summer. However, we will send something out. If you do belong to an affinity group, you will be the first to know when the application submission open. And if you're not and you're interested, you are invited to just reach out to me and let me know so that I know to make sure you have the information. It's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity, and I hope that you'll be able to experience. Thank you, Campbell Hall.